I don't doubt that reading a bank statement has brought unhappiness to many people. It's almost certainly a common occurrence, probably causing disasters far worse than my own. But that didn't help, not one bit. I was just sorting through some papers on my wife's desk at home, trying to find out whether she had paid the phone bill or something similar, something quite ordinary and innocent. That's when I found it, lying there under a pile of bills and other things, a bank statement from Barclays. I probably only noticed it because we do all our banking with HSBC, and the blue color on the heading just caught my attention. I guess she'd chosen another bank to keep it hidden, which was ironic, really, as it was that difference that led me to take note and flip through it. First, I checked the name at the top and it read Ginny Matthews, so no surprise there. But the address was somewhere in the West End of London, far south of Cambridge, where we lived. Next, I checked the figure at the bottom, £17,546. A tidy balance, but where had it come from? I had no idea. Then I looked at the list of transactions over the last 3 months, and was staggered by the regular large sums of money that had been deposited. £600 one day, over £1,000 a week later, then £800 just 6 days later, and so it went on. Now, I make a good living from my business and was used to dealing with large sums of money, but Ginny only did a bit of part-time work for some public relations company, an occasional afternoon or more likely an evening or weekend standing in for someone at some function or other. Even then, it was mainly for the fun of it, as it didn't pay a fortune. It was when I scanned the list of payouts that I was really thrown. Every month, there was the same sum of money taken out by standing order, £567. The sum sounded worryingly familiar. I walked over to her cabinet, a fancy old-fashioned roll-top affair from the late 19th century, opened it, and got out my wife's filing cabinet. She was always very neat and precise. Ginny and I shared everything, no secrets between us, or at least there hadn't been until then. I found the HSBC statements and scanned through them quickly until I found what I wanted. Having no compunctions about going through her bank details as she showed them to me regularly, there it was in black and white, her salary from the agency, £567 every month. I was lost, absolutely lost. It seemed that Ginny was paying herself her own salary from her own bank account. Why the hell would she do that? Did she really have a job at all? Where on earth did the money come from in the first place? Was this something to worry about, and was it any of my business? Like hell it was. What was Ginny up to? I grabbed the Barclays statement again and studied it in more detail, realizing that virtually the only money ever withdrawn seemed to be the monthly payments, whereas the deposits were sporadic, frequent but with no pattern. It then occurred to me that there was an awful lot more money going in than coming out. So I looked back at the balance at the bottom of the last page. Bloody hell, it wasn't £17,546. I'd missed a zero. It was £175,000. My name is Jim Matthews. I'm 38, quite presentable, and run my own computer business where I employ 2 other people. My wife Ginny is 28 to 10 years younger than me, and to my mind just about the right age difference. I give her my maturity, such as it is, my experience in life, and a very comfortable lifestyle. She gives me her relative youth, her beauty which she has in abundance, and all the fun in the world. We both give one another our love, both spiritually and physically without reserve. After 3 years of marriage, we are still head over heels in love with one another, as I had been since our first day. I'd been up in London for a meeting with a guy to discuss a deal with Google. I was sitting in the hotel bar afterward, thinking about the possible advantages of going along with their idea, when Ginny walked in and my insides flipped. It's not that I didn't have a girlfriend, in fact, I probably had too many, but none of them were that special. Somehow, I knew that Ginny could be special, but only if I could get to know her. Ginny was 5 feet 6 inches tall, slim, with nice shapely tan legs that seemed to go on forever from the dainty high heels on her feet, to where they disappeared under the very short cocktail dress she wore. She had longish dark hair, deep brown eyes, and a cute little turned-up nose. My dream girl wasn't a classic beauty, but she didn't need to be. Every man in the place must have been eyeing her up, no doubt with similar thoughts to my own. She simply used breeding, elegance, confidence, fun, and sex, and not necessarily in that order. I'm sure everyone watched her as she looked around, nodding to the receptionist who obviously knew her, no doubt a regular resident. Then she looked straight at me, and my insides did a somersault as her soft brown eyes melted away any doubts I had about wanting her. I smiled back and acknowledged her, wondering what the hell to do next. But I didn't have to worry about it. A smile that would have lit up the street outside flashed across her face as she walked toward me, suggesting, "Hi, you must be James." "Jim, not James," I replied, my voice perhaps a bit hoarse. "James, Jim, what's the difference?" She laughed, and I wasn't about to argue with her. "May I sit down?" she asked in her rather clipped, very British upper-class accent, though it was very sweet. Of course, came my urgent response as I leaped up to pull the chair back for her. Even the way she sat down showed class, as if she had been taught how to do it at some posh finishing school. I wondered, why me? What had I done to earn the attention of this dream woman on legs? How on earth did she know my name? "I'm Jenny," she said. "Sorry I'm late, but I got held up." "Thanks for waiting." She then looked at me and asked, "Are you okay, Jim?" I was fine, but she later laughed as she told me that I had looked totally shocked. I recovered quickly, and within moments we were engaged in gentle banter, delighted to discover that we shared so many interests, the same music, tennis, Indian food, and believe it or not, even rugby. Jenny was an educated woman and could speak about a whole range of subjects, unlike the others I had been with lately. Then her mobile rang. She excused herself and answered it. I heard her say, "No, I'm here." "No, he's here as well." "Couldn't be." "AGK here with me." "Oh dear, oh golly, hang on." She looked at me quizzically, the smile returning to her lovely features, and I stared back. "Were you expecting me by any chance?" she asked. "No, but I'm very pleased you arrived," I replied cheekily. "You're not James Green at all, are you?" "No, I'm Jim Matthews." "Oh," she said, giggling and lifting her mobile up. I was late and got the wrong James, or Jim actually. Her use of profanities with her posh accent was wonderful, sounded so out of place yet so natural. She turned her head and half covered her mouth so that I could not make out the next few exchanges between her and whoever was on the other end of the line. I just knew I was going to lose her in the next few minutes, and desperately tried to think of something witty to say the moment she ended the call. Then Jenny looked back at me, still holding the phone, that smile verging on a grin spreading back across her face. "No, he's quite cute actually," she said into the phone, but staring straight at me, making sure I could hear her. "Rather good-looking in a rugged sort of way. I think I may have blushed." "Okay then, give him my apologies next time he's in the UK maybe." She finished her conversation, slipping her mobile back into her back. "Well then," she said, "it looks like I've missed my appointment." "Never mind, it'll keep." The smile never left her face. "Assuming you're free this evening, what do you fancy doing? How about we do it together?" I refrained from telling her what my first choice would have been, and suggested that we have dinner. She readily agreed, and that's exactly what we did. It was the best meal of my life, and I hardly noticed what we ate. I was already under her spell. Jenny told me about her job in PR, how she set up meetings, arranged discreet functions, and helped her agency put people together in the right place at the right time. She obviously loved it, and I was already hoping she could love me as much. After the meal, I walked her back to the taxi rank, overjoyed to see a small queue, giving me more time to chat and this time to hold her. I put my arm around her and she snuggled up, sliding her arm around my waist and cuddling up to me. I kissed her lightly on the cheek, and she returned the favor. Just the sweet smell of her set my senses into overdrive. Then she looked around, maneuvered me between her and the others in the queue, put her arms around my neck, and pulled me down until our lips met. Heaven! Just the briefest of touches, but it was like discovering the land of milk and honey, and I had the honey in my arms. I got carried away and almost disgraced myself as I kissed her more hungrily, running my hands over her back, feeling the soft curve as it descended down to her bottom. "Hey, hang on," she cried and then laughed. "Give a girl a chance, can't you? We've only just met." I drew back, disappointed but not really frustrated. This was some special girl and worth the effort, worth the wait. "Sorry," I apologized. "Got carried away." She giggled deliciously yet again. "Slowly," she said. "Kiss me slowly. It'll be worth it in the long run." Christ, I was lost, and I think it was then that I fell in love with Jenny. My wife. That was it. On our first accidental date, I suggested we might go back to my hotel for a nightcap, but she wouldn't have any of it, teasing me that I was after a little more than that, and that a first date was just too soon. "Can I see you again?" I asked, and she teased me again, humming and hesitating about whether it would be worth it, all the while holding me close, pressing me against her beautiful, slim body and driving me crazy with desire. "Okay," she relented at last, shrugging her lovely shoulders. "I'll ring you." "What's your number?" I asked. "I don't trust you," I said a bit boldly. "You give me yours and I'll ring you." "Can't do, Jim," Jenny replied quietly. "I don't give my number out, especially to handsome strangers, I'm afraid." "I'll ring you." We made a compromise and agreed to meet the following Tuesday, too long for me but the earliest she could manage. What was I going to do about this newfound knowledge of my wife's affairs? Why did she have all this money and where did it come from? Sure, her parents were rich, owned an estate down in Kent, hunted, shot pheasants and had a fair share in one of the smaller merchant banks that had survived the aftermath of the Big Bang. So, obviously the family was well connected. There was no reason why my wife wouldn't have money, even sums like that, but where had it come from and why such obscure substantial sums? It had to be something to do with the public relations company she worked for, but really I had no idea. I'd ask her, but I knew I couldn't. If she was hiding it from me, then there was a reason and I had to find out that reason no matter the cost. I have to admit it frightened me a bit. It seemed impossible, but it seemed that Jenny was mixed up in some shady deal or something. I had to go down to London a few days later, so I looked up the address on the statement. It was a swishy area and full of old money, just the sort of place Jenny's family would feel comfortable in. At least that relaxed me a little. I looked at the brass plates on the door, but none of them meant anything. A couple caught my eye, Corporate Agency and Golden Circle Agency, the others all seemed to be accountants or stockbrokers by the sound of them. I waited around for a while but nobody arrived or left. No joy there. I had drawn a blank and didn't know how to proceed. All I could do was confront her, but that didn't appeal at all. She was hiding something from me, and now it seemed possible her family was involved. I had to find out what and perhaps more importantly why. Our second date was memorable and I remember quite clearly what she wore, tight denim jeans and a white sweater. It would have looked good on any attractive woman, Pierre Cardin just has that ability, but on her it was stunning. I'm sure it was women like my wife who inspired designers like him. It was a woman like my wife who might have launched 1,000 ships. We went to the theater, then on for a late dinner. It was superb again, no idea at all what we ate. Afterwards, the two of us strolled down the banks of the Thames, arm in arm like lovers throughout time. I sort of assumed she would come back to my hotel. She did, and I sort of assumed she would come up to my room. She did, and I sort of assumed she would join me in bed. She didn't. Not that we didn't enjoy ourselves. I managed to persuade her to take off her sweater, revealing her beautiful, firm figure, which was even more than I could have ever hoped for. She pulled me close, kissing me passionately, her tongue exploring mine. The very taste of her sent me into a trance. My fingers began to undo the top button and she gasped, letting out a small cry. Her body instinctively moved closer to my hand. Then she suddenly stopped, perhaps realizing how far things were going and where it might lead. "No, please no," she whispered, holding my hand but without the resolve to actually push it away. "I'm not ready, not yet. Please don't." It was maybe the most difficult decision I had ever made until then. I stopped and pulled back. She made no attempt to stop me, almost daring me to defy her, looking at me imploringly, trusting me not to. Then the moment was over and we cuddled up, kissing and holding one another tightly. Bloody hell, we were adults, me in my 30s and her in her 20s, but she wasn't ready, not yet. I asked what the problem was, if there was indeed a problem, and she nodded, whispered yes and then burst into tears. What can you do if you love the woman? And by then I undoubtedly did. You accept it. I held her tightly, spoke to her calmly and told her that everything was okay. We lay there like that and my passion slowly died down, only my love for her remaining. A good hour later she sighed, eventually got up and apologized, tears starting to run down her cheeks again. "I'm sorry," she whimpered. "I'm in such a mess, such an awful mess. You've no idea at all." I pulled her tight to me, the tighter the better, to make all her problems go away. And eventually, for the time being at least, they did. "Thank you, Jim," she said at last. "You are the most wonderful man," she said, kissing me, and everything seemed fine. We stayed there cuddling for some time, but eventually it had to end. I found myself escorting her out to the taxis yet again. It was 1 a.m. and still no sex, but I'd never felt so bloody good in my life. I thought about confronting Jenny with the problem of where all the money had come from and why she was paying herself. At best, it could be from her family, maybe cash they were stashing away from the tax man. That theory appealed to me for some time, but it seemed too easy and convenient, and I knew there was more to it. I had no other explanation, just a knot building up in my stomach that not all was as it seemed, and that I was in for a major shock. Even then, I couldn't imagine how big a shock I was in for. One evening, I followed her all the way to London when she was off on one of her jobs for the PR firm. I kept her Audi carefully in my sights to see if she really did go to the hotel where her company had set up some meeting, or if she would slip off to meet someone sinister. But no, there she was, pulled up outside the correct hotel, good as gold, elegantly stepping out of her car and handing the keys to some attendant. Nothing to get upset about, and several hours were wasted following her all the way down from Cambridge. What a bloody fool I had become. I resolved to just ask her. The explanation would surely be quite simple. I'd ask her that very night when she got back, however late it might be. But she didn't come back that night and woke me in the morning. The ring of the telephone brought me back into the real world, away from my tormented sleep, as I raised myself from the sofa where I had spent the night waiting for a return. "Hi, Jim," she chirped, as happy and bright as a lark. "Sorry, got really tied up in some discussions last night, and the company paid for a room at the hotel for me. Went well, though. I'll be back before lunchtime. How about lunch at the Bull and I'll tell you about it?" "Why didn't you ring me last night?" I demanded. "I've been worried." "I did," she said with concern, but there was no answer. "I left a message." I looked down and sure enough, the message light was flashing on the phone. She must have wronged when I was on my way back from London, and I hadn't noticed with all the other things on my mind. I agreed to meet her at the Bull, but I was still confused. I felt the world closing in on me, unsure of what to do or what else to say. The next week I followed her again, feeling like a traitor and hating myself for the distrust I felt and the thoughts that were permeating my brain. Our third date was a defining moment. I'd looked forward to it like an adolescent, hoping against hope that all would go well, hoping that I might get her into bed, but even more than that, praying that the date would go well, that she would be happy, and that the awkward tensions of our previous date would not resurface. We met on neutral ground halfway between London and Cambridge, at a lovely little place that I had discovered some months before. It was an inspired choice, and Jenny was relaxed from the start. Everything I could have wished for, from the moment she turns every head in the place when she arrived, until she whispered in my ear at the end of our meal, "Do they have rooms here, Jim?" she asked, and my prayers seemed answered. It would be difficult to describe how special that night was, but I'll try. I wasn't inexperienced, but it felt as though I had discovered something rare, someone so beautiful yet so innocent in her own way. Already in her 20s, she was nervous as I gently undressed her, as if it was the first time she had ever experienced this. She shivered as I unfastened her dress and let it fall to the floor. I laid her back on the bed, determined to make the experience unforgettable for her. Her breathing was heavy and rapid, her eyes closed. "Jim, Jim, please Jim," she whispered softly, but the rest was lost as a shiver ran through her. Her body relaxed and she finally opened her eyes, looking up at me with an expression that said only one thing: "I love you, Jim. I really love you." My woman stuttered uncertainty, "I think I'm ready now. Please be gentle." Then we had amazing sex. I took control, withdrawing just a little as I made love to her, and she returned it in full. We lay silently in each other's arms, relishing one another's nakedness, both satisfied and contented. "Thank you, Jim," Jenny whispered into my chest. "Thank you, my love." I kissed her and told her how much I loved her as well. "I needed that, Jim," she said after a few moments. "I've needed that for a long time, and I'm just so glad it was you." The second time I followed Jenny was even easier. I knew the hotel where her meeting was scheduled and let Jenny get ahead, arriving half an hour or so after her, wondering what the hell I was doing there and what I was going to do. I slunk into the reception area, terrified that she would spot me and having no idea what explanation I could possibly make for my being there. She wasn't there, of course, why should she be? I made my way to the bar, peeping in, already having decided that this was all so stupid and childish, and that I would leave immediately if she wasn't there. But Jenny was there in the bar, chatting with some guy. She was sitting with her back to me, but I knew it was her, and the man she was talking to looked American, much older than Jenny, maybe in his late 50s. He was expensively dressed and impeccably groomed. I felt the tension draining out of me as I realized that he was exactly as he should be, a rich client of the agency, obviously some businessman she was discussing arrangements with. I felt such a fool, cursing myself for suspecting that Jenny had been involved with some man, even though I hadn't admitted to those thoughts until that moment. What was I to do? I was still no closer to the truth about the money, but at least my main fear had been allayed. She wasn't having an affair. Maybe this guy was connected to the money she'd been hiding away, but I was no super sleuth and had no way of progressing further. Go home, I thought to myself, just go home and stop being so silly. Another few hours wasted driving up to London and back because of my stupid doubts. Then Jenny stood up and my stomach tightened. She looked fabulous and so sexy in a tight black mini dress that just skimmed below her bottom, leaving her long, slim legs exposed. The dress molded around her body, so that even from across the room I could see she couldn't possibly have been wearing a bra. The tightness in my middle grip tied her, but it wasn't just how gorgeous my wife looked, it was that I had never seen that dress before. It certainly wasn't the smart gray skirt suit Jenny had left our house in just a few hours earlier. My chest tightened, but I told myself I was being silly again, unreasonable. Why wouldn't she change for an evening meeting? Why shouldn't Jenny look sexy to impress an important customer? Then she laughed at something he said and smiled at him, her smile, the one that would light up the street outside, the smile I always imagined she reserved for me. Worse, she reached up and put her hand on his chest playfully, not the sort of gesture a woman would make to a business client, not unless she knew him very well indeed. The thought that it could be a friend of her father's flashed through my mind, an old family friend, maybe like an uncle, but I was clutching at straws. When Jenny reached up, stretching on her tiptoes to kiss him on the cheek, my world started to go black. A dark rage came over me, only getting worse as he bent down and returned the kiss, but directly on her lips. The two of them held it for longer than any uncle and niece had a right to. The prick, the scumsucker, the cheating scumsucker, I'd kill him, but I could only stand there and watch as Jenny played up even more to him, cuddling up to him as he put his arm affectionately around her, grinning at her as she so often did to me. He patted her bottom, molding her gorgeous body into his as he squeezed her tightly. I couldn't breathe, needed air, but I couldn't leave, couldn't pull myself away from the dreadful scene being played out before my eyes. They kissed again, this time with even more feeling, and Jenny, my beautiful, sweet Jenny, seemed blissfully lost in the company of this unknown man. "Can I help you, sir?" I looked around and saw some uniformed flunky questioning my right to be there, questioning my right to watch my beloved wife making out with some scumsucker stranger. "Go to hell!" I shouted far too loudly. It all got out of hand after that, and he called for help. 3 of them manhandled me out to the back in trance as I watched Jenny going off with this stranger, laughing at his no doubt stupid bloody jokes, running her hand up and down his back, and making no objection as he reached down and grabbed the cheeks of her bum as if he owned it. I found myself on the floor in a back alley, a few scratches on my face but no serious harm done. I made my way back to the front and stormed in, determined to confront her, to find out what was going on. But the security guys caught me again, threw me out on my ear, threatening to be less gentle if I didn't clear off. They were unwilling to listen to my pleas that my wife was in there with another man. I slunk off, searching hopelessly up at the windows, wondering which set of curtains they were hidden behind. The thought of what that scumsucker was doing to my Jenny, my dearest Jenny, tore at my soul. What hold did he have over her? Where did the money come into this? Damn it, the money didn't matter anymore. My wife Jenny was in there somewhere being screwed by her lover, and I was powerless to stop it. After that last date, things went wonderfully. I felt like a teenager in love again, and it just never seemed to go away. Jenny seemed the same, and I met her parents, who seemed overjoyed that at last someone had won her heart. We were married 6 months later, with the biggest wedding I'd ever been to or am ever likely to attend, all paid for by her wealthy parents. They seemed more interested in making a good show of it than anything else. I vaguely tried to find out if she had any troubled past experiences, why she had apparently still been a virgin in her 20s in this day and age, but she didn't wish to discuss it, promising to tell me all about it one day. We were so happy, so in love, that it didn't seem to matter anyway. The first 6 months were bliss unless you worked for me, of course. In that case, it seemed nobody could get much sense out of me. It didn't matter as everyone was happy for me, even my competitors, so touched that they didn't take too much advantage. Like hell they didn't. It came as a wake-up call when we lost a big account, and I had to put a lot more effort into my business. Not that I neglected Jenny, but she felt the difference. She seemed to lose a bit of her spirit and acted a bit down. "What's up, Jenny love?" I asked for the 10th time, not really expecting a sensible answer. She looked at me, sighed, and at last told me I'm a bit bored, she admitted. "Not with you, not at all. You're wonderful." I smiled back at her, happy to hear her say it, even though our lovemaking had waned considerably over the last few months. "I need something to interest me, keep my brain working. Maybe I could do a bit of work for my old agency." She had stopped working for them just after our marriage and had seemed happy, but it was true that recently there was obviously something missing in her life. "Would they take you back? Have you asked them?" I ventured, thinking it might be a good idea. Jenny smiled that smile, and I knew her mind was made up and that I had no argument, even if I thought of one. "They've wronged me every month since we were married. They're desperate for me to go back," she sang out. "I've sort of suggested that I might go back and do a bit, just part-time." It was settled. The following week she went back up to London to see them, and started a few days later doing some afternoon meetings for them. She came home that evening full of smiles, as happy as Larry. She'd had a great day and all was well again. The Matthews household was back on track. I had nothing to complain about as Jenny rediscovered her zest for life and her energy for sex even more than before, though I wouldn't have thought it possible. Jenny had always liked straightforward sex previously, which I put down to her lack of experience, shying nervously away from anything out of the ordinary. But from then on she became liberated, totally prepared to try anything. It was surprising how naturally good at it all she was and how much she loved it. I had no idea why I deserved this unrivaled pleasure. I didn't worry about it and just enjoyed it. The next 2 years or so were incredible. The earlier problems had disappeared. We spent every possible spare moment together, and I pined when she was out for the evening, even more so when she was away for a whole weekend in Paris, New York, or wherever. Her job took her mainly to London, and whenever I could I tried to arrange.